What happens when one of the world's biggest black comedians allows himself and other blacks to be roasted by white comedians on one of the world's biggest streaming platforms? And importantly, what does that reveal about race, about inclusion, media power, and the modern society itself? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside VirtX Live, where we examine the systems that are shaping media, culture, and public perception. I'm your host, Mary Jane, and I'm bringing you a conversation that may seem funny on the surface, but underneath it reveals something much more deeper about entertainment, about race, and social behavior. Also, importantly, the hidden power of media. Now, for those who may not know this, Netflix recently hosted this comedy film titled The Roast of Kevin Hart. The show was hosted by a white comedian, Shane Gills, and it featured a mix of black comedians, white comedians, athletes, celebrities, and entertainers from different backgrounds. Now, the entire idea behind the roast is simple. People insult each other publicly for entertainment.
Kevin, if you're thinking this is just going to be a bunch of jokes about you being short and annoying, that's true. We will be doing that.
But this roast became especially controversial because of how heavily it played with race, stereotypes, and, would I say, dark, edgy humor.
To really understand Kevin's origins, you have to go back to the beginning. Kevin's ancestors came to America in a slave ship in a bottle. He grew up in Philadelphia, where his mother worked at the University of Pennsylvania, and his father was one of the California raisins. I'm just joking around. He wasn't raising anybody.
Some viewers loved it. Others felt, parts of it crossed uncomfortable racial boundaries. And critics have accused sections of the show of normalizing offensive humor.
Jokes about lynching black people or lynching is not a joke. It's not, Kevin didn't deserve that. He deserved like an elevated road.
Commercializing race and blurring lines that society has historically treated as very careful, offensive, and sensitive. And honestly, this is where the conversation becomes interesting because this show is not just about jokes. This is about who gets to joke about who and what. It's also about what the society considers as acceptable. It's also about how media can test social boundaries and how entertainment slowly reshapes public comforts and culture over time. Because once people are repeatedly seeing something in entertainment, they slowly become more emotionally familiar with it. And this is one of the most powerful things that media does. It doesn't do it forcefully. It doesn't do it aggressively. It does it subtly, repeatedly, until it resonates emotionally. And then we don't know where it came from. In fact, the truth is we often underestimate how deeply entertainment shapes culture itself. For example, many people don't even realize, like we said in the last episode, that the phrase bro code became globally popularized through entertainment, through a show, particularly through a sitcom like How I Met Your Mother and the character Barney Stinson.
Don't get married until you're 30. Play laser tag once a week. Give at least as many high fives as you get. Teacup pigs are lady magnets.
And at first, it looked like harmless and probably was, intended to be just a harmless, fun, and entertaining show. But through that show, we can see over time how certain attitudes around masculinity, emotional detachment, I'm talking about toxic masculinity, male bonding, and just the terms of how relationships should be, have become normalized socially. And today, we see entire generations embody versions of those ideas without even realizing where some of them have come from. That is media influence, media power. That's the ultimate power that's dictating how you live your life without your permission or conscious consent. Now, Netflix is a distribution platform that understands modern audiences very well. So this show isn't random, far from it. The roast appears to have been attempting several things at once. We're talking about topics on racial inclusivity, cultural crossover, controversy-driven virality, which of course is a thing. And, this modern idea of everyone should be able to joke together about anything and everything. Essentially, it's presenting multicultural participation as entertainment. And to be fair, there are positives to that. Comedy has historically proven to challenge power, challenge taboos, and it opened up different difficult conversations that the society, you know, has been afraid to have directly. So shows like this can normalize multicultural interaction. It can reduce tension through humor. It can humanize different groups and it can create shared cultural moments. And I'm not saying that really that was the aim. This is no stamp of approval of the show. In fact, I watched the show and the language of the show, there was dark humor. In my own personal opinion, it was just edgy and, the racial slurs, I think, it was just a little bit too much for me, right? But again, that is culture. Anyway, but that's by the way. The show itself, I was talking about, the host was Shane Gills. Shane Gills is a white host, and he has previously faced backlash over racial jokes and controversial language. So Netflix choosing him specifically to do the show as the host certainly was far from accidental. It was provocative, it was strategic and intentional, to say the least. Or you'll ask why? Why? Simple. Controversy today drives attention. Attention drives engagement. Engagement drives modern entertainment. And of course, it brings in the money. Simple. And it worked because in the first week, the show pulled in at least 13.5 million viewers. Yep, that's it. That's controversy in media. It brings in the attention, and of course, the money follows. And this is dominance, ownership. But something else that many viewers couldn't help but notice, during the show, where I couldn't help but notice the invisible racial boundaries. Certain words still carried very different weights depending on who was saying them. I mean, words such as, the N word, the use of the word nigger, by, white hosts seemed like it was prohibited. So even inside comedy, what we can see is that there are lines that people instinctively know are culturally dangerous to cross, even publicly. Now, the blacks could use the word nigger, but the whites would refer to it as the N word. But this is exactly how culture is shaped because we could see them negotiating race boundaries in real time. And this is exactly what it is. Entertainment is often used as the testing ground for those negotiations. And this is where I think the conversation becomes especially important for us as Africans. Because while many Western countries are pushing the boundaries and aggressively trying to negotiate diversity, multiculturalism, and coexistence through media and entertainment, many African societies are becoming increasingly fragmented internally, right? We're seeing xenophobia, tribal division, national hostility, online hatred between Africans, and growing cultural fragmentation. And media plays a role in this reality because the stories that societies repeatedly tell eventually become societal social behavior. If entertainment can normalize inclusion, if entertainment can normalize promote multicultural interaction and coexistence, then why do many African media spaces still often reinforce stereotypes, mockery of one another, national superiority narratives, and just cause unnecessary division? And this is a serious question because Africa already has had its diversity naturally. We've always been multicultural, different tribes, languages, identities, religions, cultures. But perhaps one thing we have failed to intentionally build strongly enough is collaborative narratives. Stories that can consistently reinforce our shared identity, shared growth, shared futures. And that matters because media doesn't just entertain society. Over time, it helps to shape it. And this is why conversations like this sit at the heart of what we do at Inside VirtX Live. Because it's bigger than comedy, it's bigger than film, it's bigger than music. It's about how media negotiates social boundaries, how entertainment can help to shape ideologies, how storytelling can influence behavior, and how culture itself is engineered over time. And maybe the real question tonight is, if entertainment can normalize division, can it also normalize unity?
Friend Tony Hinchcliffe is here. Give it up for Tony. Tony Hinchcliffe looks like he burns things in his living room and waits for the firefighters to come rescue him.
Welcome back to Inside VirtX Live. Now let's move on to something else that is big and happening on the scenes. Nigerian billionaire Aliko Dangote has proposed building a mega oil refinery in East Africa with a capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. Now, it's targeted for completion within 5 years from now, and the facility aims to boost regional energy security and reduce reliance on raw exports. This is the news. If you look at recent headlines across the continent, most people see one thing when they read this headline. They're like, oh, Dangote is building another refinery. But they are missing the point. The real story here is not about oil. The real story is about a massive structural shift. For the first time, Africa is beginning to experiment with regional scale, like on a massive level, African owned infrastructure on a massive level. We're talking about ownership here, dominance, oil, massive East African refinery project worth $15 to $17 billion, drawing in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, and DR Congo. This is African industrial regionalism that we should be lauding. But whenever a mega move like this happens, and we look around us, the reaction from the populace and small business owners is something that's off. The default response is often cynicism, hate, and dismissing it all as corporate greed. And that's the thing. We focus too much on criticizing the billionaire that we completely miss the masterclass that is taking place right in front of us. Because here's the cold, hard truth. The big players dominating the global scenes don't care about race, class, colors, or borders. They don't get bogged down by petty prejudices. They know one language. The language they know is the language of success. And because they speak that language, it's incredibly easy for them to work together. So while the masses are, having a bad day, going online and having loud, unnecessary conversations about Ghana versus Nigeria and Jollof, fueling xenophobia and the hate. You could see the people on the streets that were talking about xenophobia and which Nigerian man is taking up their women. Those people are the least successful. Arguing about over which countries men or women spend the more money. First is that the people actually shaping the world cannot relate to those conversations. They don't have time for them. And that's the truth. Simply because their inner circles consist of partners from every corner of the continent that are working on a foundation of absolute trust amongst themselves to execute deals that will change the world. So while we fight over boundaries drawn for us in 1884, they are building bridges for 2026 and beyond. The lesson here, guys, is in oil. The lesson here is skill. The lesson here is collaboration. The lesson here is partnership. The lesson here is unity. The lesson here is harnessing diversity and multiculturalism and understanding how to exploit it. Dangote thinks continentally, intercontinentally. He thinks infrastructurally. He thinks generationally. Meanwhile, too many of our local businesses are thinking nationally, transactionally, and short term. So, what should individuals like us actually be doing? Guys, here's what I say. Instead of hating the player, why not study the playbook? We need to shift our mindset from small scale survival, to ecosystem power. We need to start building cross-border networks of trust, just like the elites do. And this is where the media and content studios come in. Because let's be honest, people don't unite around policy papers. They unite around stories. And right now, our media ecosystems are heavily nationalized and fragmented. Nigerians consume Nigerian media. Kenyans consume Kenyan media. We are intellectually aware of unification, but we don't feel it emotionally. So studios and storytellers have a massive responsibility here to drive a unified agenda. How do we do it? Intentionally creating content that crosses borders, producing shows, films, podcasts that normalize cross continental collaborations and partnerships, and positive, not negative stereotypes. We need to stop feeding the algorithm cheap tribal divisiveness for easy views and start creating strong continental narratives that force Africans to emotionally imagine a shared, wealthy future. Because the world is rapidly reorganizing into powerful economic blocs. America is collaborating. Europe is collaborating regionally. Even the Gulf states are buying up media, sports, entertainment. China is building globally. India is setting up massive structures. Africa cannot afford to remain fragmented emotionally, economically, and culturally while expecting to hold true global power. It is time to stop having small conversations and start building at a global scale. And please, don't start by saying it rests on the leaders. It rests on you. Are you a business owner? Are you an entrepreneur? What are you doing with the power that you have? The office of the citizen. Use your platform. Speak out for collaboration. Speak out for globalization. Okay. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Welcome back to Inside VirtX Live, guys. Now let's look ahead to what is about to be the biggest cultural takeover on the planet. We're talking about the 2026 World Cup. The 2026 World Cup is hosted across the US, Canada, and Mexico. And for the first time in history, the tournament has expanded to 48 teams, which means a record breaking 10 African nations are stepping onto the pitch. We're talking Morocco, Senegal, Egypt, Ghana, South Africa, even Cape Verde making their debut. Now, on the surface, everyone is celebrating that Africa has gotten like a digit representation and our football is growing, which is great. But this is what we do at Inside Vertex Life. We go beyond the surface because if you're only looking at the pitch, guys, you're missing the real game. The World Cup is no longer just about ball. The World Cup is a massive machine of media power, advertising billions, national branding, and deliberate soft power. We're looking at cultural engineering at its finest. Think about it. Why are nations willing to spend billions hosting or investing in sports? Is it just for entertainment? Is it just for fun? Look at how the Gulf states are aggressively buying up European football clubs and staging massive global events. This isn't just for the heck of it. This isn't coincidence. This is cultural engineering at its finest. They're not doing it just because they love the game. They understand that sports is the ultimate tool to shape global identity and influence. Sports washes away geopolitical friction. It buys instant global prestige. Guys, like I say, let's look at the inside vertex angle, the part that people are not seeing. While 10 African countries are heading to North Africa to go fight for glory, traditional heavyweights like Nigeria and Cameroon completely failed to qualify. Why? It is because we are still treating sports like an emotional game. We're treating it as a short-term transactional hustle. We're waiting for a tournament to arrive. We pray for a miracle. We rely purely on raw talent, and then we fight over administrative bonuses. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is treating sports and negotiating heavily on sports as an industry, as an ecosystem, as a soft power tool for prestige, national prestige, and a bargaining tool in the world. The West and the Gulf states have centralized sports as a multi-billion-dollar economic engine. They're building infrastructure, they're controlling media rights, they're designing the narratives, and Africa will remain the exporters of raw material and perpetrators of xenophobia and xenophobic content. We're exporting our best teenage talent to European academies, only to buy back the broadcasting rights to watch our own brothers play on foreign television channels. This is what Africans are doing. We're exporting raw materials and we import the finished product at a premium. Football, guys, football. Football is, if not the most powerful tool, one of the most powerful cultural tools on earth. It forces people to emotionally imagine a shared future. So when Senegal plays, the entire continent watches. When Morocco makes a semi-final run, all of Africa feels that pride. But if we don't start building our own local sports ecosystem on our own world-class leagues and, and with our own media infrastructure, because the conversation here is about ownership and dominance. Africans need to get out of this consumer mindset into an ownership mindset. We are just highly talented actors playing in someone else's movie. And the last time we checked, a talent cannot beat a system. 10 teams in the World Cup is a massive milestone, agreed. But true power isn't just about being invited to the tournament, it's about owning the game. And that's all for this episode of Inside VirtX Live. I'll be seeing you on the next one. Stay tuned.